Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
AI has stolen headlines across the global business community, but we need to think of it as more than just a chat tool. This is your host, Michael Howard, the head of marketing at Infotools, and this is Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. Today we're joined by Chris Robson, a visionary AI and data scientist, and is in fact the Senior Director, Global Data Science at Humanate. He's also held similar roles in other organizations too. Thanks for joining us on the show today, Chris.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what is the most significant thing that you're going to share with us today?
Well, what I want to talk about is how it's important now for us in the research industry and the insights industry to look beyond AI as a chat tool and look at its broader capabilities. I think there's been a lot of excitement, and a lot of that excitement has been it's been well placed about what can be done. But I think for many people within the industry, their experience is purely through the chat interface. And while that's a great place to start, it actually is quite limiting. And if we're going to get serious about using it either as individuals or as an industry, we need to look beyond that. And so that's really what I want to talk about today.
Okay, so what are some of your tips for unlocking that full potential then, for looking past just the chat side of things, especially in the insights world? Keen to hear.
Well, so the things that we need to look at is to go beyond the chat, like I say, and start to think about workflows, start to think about the things we're trying to achieve. What are all the different steps? And one of the things that will happen is when you start thinking about workflows and what you're trying to achieve, you'll realize that the chat modality, this way of doing things, really doesn't meet the needs of the kind of things we're doing. The underlying technologies are phenomenal and will help us to do these things. But we really need to twist it a little bit and say it's not just about chat, but it's about what are we trying to achieve and what are the steps we need to do to get there? And then how do we use this technology along the way to make those steps happen? And I think it's that shift that a lot of people struggle with, especially if their only experience with artificial intelligence is through the chat interfaces. People kind of have a very limited viewpoint. They say, oh, I ask a question, it gives me a response. I ask a question. And the reality is there's much, much more to these technologies. For those of us who've been working with these technologies for many years, I mean, the underlying technologies came out in 2019. And those who have been working with those since then, we kind of have a slightly different way of looking at it. That's not, it includes chat. I don't want to dump on chat, but chat is not the best place to start generally when we're thinking about these things. So the key thing is really to start thinking about workflows, not chat.
Okay, and what do you mean exactly by workflows? What are some tangible examples, I guess, in the day and life of a market researcher?
Well, so one of the ways I like to describe this to people is to play a little thought experiment, as to say, imagine you had a new intern in the office and you realize immediately that she's really smart, that she's really bright, and she's going to go far. She's going to be your boss in 10 years, okay? That type of intern, we've all had those. And you think about how you would work with that really smart but new capability. You wouldn't just sit down at a desk and just ask them questions. And that's the chat interface. Okay, you sit down, you ask questions. What would you do about this? What would you do about that? Tell me more about this. And while you might get value that way, you're going to start really getting value if you sit down with the intern and say, hey, here's something we do with our clients. We do this. We do interviews with them, and then we summarize those interviews. We produce a report, and the report has to be able to go to the executives. You see what I'm saying? I'm laying out all the things that need to happen. Okay, then what she would do is she'd go away and she'd break that up into steps and you say, okay, first I need to do this. Now I need to do this. Now I need to do this. That's the workflow. This is what I mean by workflow, by saying, what are all the things that have to happen? How do they have to happen? And when you do that, what you can start doing is you can say, okay, now, so that's how we would work with another human being. How do we work with these artificial intelligences, these large language models? And we take the models and we say, okay, what's the first thing I need to do? Maybe I need to summarize a large amount of text. Can I summarize the large amount of text? No, first I have to break it down. First thing I do then is break it down. And then I summarize the chunks, what we call the chunks, and summarize those. And then I put all those summaries together and then I write a report. And this is what I mean when I say think workflow, where you don't think just one prompt with the chat, but you start to break things up and you start to say, this is what has to happen, then this has to happen. And you'll find that all of the great applications out there of artificial intelligence at the moment really work on that basis. That's, that people are working with the bit saying, I need to achieve this, these are the steps I need to achieve it, and that's the workflow I need to do to achieve it.
Do you feel that there are some workflows that AI, as it currently stands, is better able to help and assist the research community?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment there are certain things, there are certain of those steps that AI does a phenomenal job of. It's excellent. It's excellent at summarizing and extracting meaning from large amounts of text. It's also excellent at extracting meaning from data generally. One of the things we do is we work a lot with clickstream data, the data that's gathered when you click through websites and things like that. Asking AI to summarize what's going on with a ton of data is incredibly powerful, something that would have taken us hours of poring over data in the past, we can now do in 20 minutes. So it's excellent at summarizing things. It's excellent at looking for patterns in things. All of these things, which are typically things we do, but it can do faster under our supervision. Okay, and I stress under our supervision because we still need to work with it. We don't just let it go open loop, but getting it to say, hey, here's, so the kind of example which would be common within Insights is, I've got 20 hours of transcripts from IDIs. Okay, now, to be able to say to the system, tell me who spoke about environmental issues in those IDIs, and for it to give you the passages and who was actually talking. Otherwise, I mean, it's not we didn't do that in the past. We absolutely did, but we did it by poring through and making guesses at searches and things like that. We've all done it. But now we can actually say, tell me who was talking about environmental issues in that 20 hours of IDIs. What were they saying? What were they worried about? That's the kind of thing that the AI can be incredibly powerful at.
Yes, no, absolutely. So how about if we think about some of the limitations of chat interfaces, which I guess is some of the things that have caused you to think beyond the chat in itself?
Well, one of the things we've noticed, is people who've got excited about the AI, and they should be. I mean, it's exciting and a little scary at the same time. But people who've got excited about it have typically sat with the chat interface, and we've done all of us have done the things about, write a memo to my boss in the voice of a pirate, and we all do that, and it's a lot of fun. And then you realize you can start to do some things which are work related. Summarize this piece of text, or translate this this Chinese open-end that I've just received, and I don't speak Chinese, as you probably guessed. And we can do that kind of thing with the chat interface. However, as you say, there are limitations, and there are a couple of limitations. One is the limitation that you really should not be putting any confidential information into a public interface. Okay, that's just now most companies now are coming out with guardrails and rules to say do not do this, but we, certainly, we, in our company in Humanate, we have a very strict rule: no client data gets pasted into any public interface. Absolute no. And that's, that's just obvious, and some of the stuff that we have to do. So, very often when we're working in the insights industry, we are working with either business confidential information, or we're working with actual PII, which we absolutely cannot put into that. So there's a lot of issues around what can actually be put into a public chat interface, like ChatGPT or BERT or Bing. Any of those, we really should not be putting anything that's confidential in there. So there's that, and then there's the other main issue that people run into really quickly is they kind of think it's cool because, hey, I can summarize this piece of text. And then what happens is they then put in a real amount of text, a proper document, and find that the system buffs and says, my context window is full. Okay. All of these models that we use today have what are called fixed context windows. And that's, if the amount of text for both your prompt and the response goes beyond that size, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit. And so people start to say, well, I have to chunk this up. I have to make this small. Well, you can't do that with the public interface at the moment. And what you have to do is build a workflow to do what we call chunk and chain, which is to chunk it up into little bits and then to give it to the model bit by bit, and then ask the model to come back to us with aggregations. So those are probably the two biggest, the issue with the public interface at the moment. One is, like I say, the confidentiality. The other is the size of that context window, because the type of data we're working with very quickly goes beyond the context window. We have to look at it differently.
I'm sure some people are out there wondering, like, didn't you use millions of documents in your training and you can't analyze a 5,000 word document?
It's absolutely true. Yeah, the size. Well, and actually, when you look at the size of these, ChatGPT is, I believe, 50-something billion nodes. That's the number of parameters it takes to do it. But yeah, because of the way it works, because it's actually basically doing an optimization problem, it's a fixed window. Now, those windows are getting bigger. That's the good news. And they're charging more for the bigger windows as well. But even so, no matter how big that window gets, there'll always be a document that's going to be too big to go in there. But you're absolutely right. They're trained on billions, trillions of documents, but they are restricted to typically, an 8 or 16K what we call token window. So typically you're talking about, a few pages of text you can put in there, but that's it.
Now, another limitation, particularly for quantitative researchers might be interested in, is how well can these LLMs or large language models cope with respondent level data versus your aggregate data?
So when we're working with respondent level data, we actually have to change the model we work a little bit with, and you'll hear people use the term at the moment RAG, R-A-G, which stands for retrieval augmented generation, and this is something that's got quite trendy in the technology side, which is this idea of being able to work with large numbers of individual documents. So think of every respondent as its own document, and instead putting those documents into a database, a very special kind of database called a vector database, and then basically using the AI system to fetch the most relevant documents from that database, and then work with those documents. So this is called RAG. And this retrieval augmented generation is incredibly powerful when you have a lot of data. And again, it's something you can't do through the chat interface. You have to actually build the database and build this workflow of working against the database. But a lot of the more interesting, exciting applications at the moment are using either that kind of model or a similar model to that. There are a number of other models around there, but those really can work at the respondent level. You can have one document per respondent, and then you can say, we're using it to actually allow us to have conversations with some of the data we have, and some of the things I was saying earlier, like who was talking about environmental issues, and to be able to retrieve those, bring those back, and then ask questions around those.
Yeah, quite exciting, isn't it, for what's possible? So just thinking about, no, we've covered that. That's all good. Could you share a specific project or examples where implementing well-defined workflows have significantly improved, I guess, the application of AI, but then also led to positive outcomes for clients?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that I alluded to earlier, but I can go a little bit more in detail, is the example that a lot of us have of 20 hours worth of transcripts, and and now we have that. Getting those transcripts is easier than it's ever been, because now we have systems like Whisper and things like that, which can actually create transcripts from the raw audio, those kind of things. But the question is, how now do we actually produce some summarization, get the main insights out of there, things like that. Now, one of the things I want to stress is, when we do this, we always have humans in the loop, where that's just the way we work. And so one of the things that we've often done in the past is you would have the dreaded pre-read for the storytelling meeting. I've got 20 hours of transcripts. We need to actually bring this together. We need to tell a story to the client or whatever about what we learned and what the key things are. And typically the way we've done this is by setting up storytelling meetings, and as pre-read, as homework, we've had the transcripts. Okay, and that's a lot of reading. 20 hours of transcripts gonna take you 10 hours to read. It's that's just the way it is. And so now what we can do is, if you think about it, what we do is we do this kind of hierarchical workflow where we take each individual transcript, say it was 20 people for an hour each or whatever, take each one, chunk that up into pieces. Okay, again, this is all done through code, all done automatically. Chunk it up into pieces, get the AI to summarize each of the chunks, get the AI to build then a summary of each individual's discussion. And so we end up with this kind of hierarchy of from the raw text up to the descriptions of the paragraphs, up to the overall discussion that was going on, up to the top level. This is what the person was concerned with. This is what they cared about. This is what they wanted us to know. And then we can put the 20 together, and we can get the system to write a report. And the report can be a full report of everything that happened in that. And that, running that it's not instantaneous. It probably takes 20 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on the amount of data there's in there. But in
That's
that,
that's outrageous, by the way. 20
yeah,
minutes, like.
I know, yeah, exactly, yeah, and so we can have at least an internally, and because of the way we work, we use that for internal purposes for our for our storytelling meetings and things like that. But as you can imagine, that really saves so much time. I mean, if you've got half a dozen researchers in the meeting, then you've probably saved 50 hours in work just with that one thing. So that's the kind of thing where, again, thinking about the workflow, and you'd never be able to do that cutting and pasting that into a chat interface. The sad news is that I say the sad news, it makes me happy, but it doesn't make many people happy, is you do have to write code in order to do that. And that's why I do believe that companies like your own, the platform companies, are the ones who are a step ahead of most of the agencies, because you have to be able to write code to do some of this stuff.
Yeah,
You can't.
and that's just now. So I mean, the drag and drop like websites and design, etc., that's come a long way. So again, it used to certain design things or building
Yeah,
websites used to be very manual, hard coding,
yeah,
and then because thanks to innovation, customer
yeah.
need and experiences, things have improved. So the whole prompt engineering, as you were talking about before, is something that is a specific skill set for now, but in time, we'll see that ease up as well.
Ab
And
ab Yeah, absolutely. As the tools mature, I think where this will open up this to a lot more people. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a challenge for platforms like ours as well to take that and go, okay, how can we make this accessible to the layperson,
Yep.
to the wider market?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's all very exciting, and just the tools, as you say, the changes in the as the platform tools evolve and get better, as you say, some of the things we call the no-code tools, the tools that allow you to build the kind of thing you used to have to write code for, but now you don't. No-code tools, as those are evolving as well. And that just accelerates the pace of change in terms of how fast we can get towards things.
Yeah, it is always interesting, slight digression, but how many people, when you meet them, they say, oh, I work in tech. And it's just kind of a catch-all these days, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
so many people are on those the fringe
Absolutely.
sectors. So I guess in discussing the growing programming ecosystem around AI technologies, you recommend specific tools for companies with development capabilities. What are some of those key tools and technologies that are crucial for implementing AI workflows, for instance?
Yeah, and the reality is, and it used to be you could say, oh, you could use this or you could use this. 90% of all of this is happening in Python at the moment, in the Python ecosystem. There are things, there are other ways of using the tools, but one of the things I've actually been saying, not just about AI, but one of the things I've been saying for a long time is that the insights industry needs to get better at coding. And we're seeing this, the platform part of the AI industry is the fastest growing part of the industry. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's providing the most value at the moment. And it really is that if you can build, or has been up to this point, to the discussion we were just having, it's important to be able to build. And for most people, that means Python. Okay. Now, so one of the things I say to all of the people in the insights industry, either you have to be coding or you have to have a close partner who's coding. That's one of those two things has to be true. It's not that every company has to code, But if you're not coding, you have to have close partners who are, building the platforms or doing whatever that will stay at the top. Because if you're not, that we're not going to get the value. And in terms of the ecosystem, there's within the Python programming ecosystem, there's a huge number of tools coming up, and to be honest, we're still in a bit point where the tools are still kind of in flux as to what the best tools are to work with this thing. I use something called LangChain a lot. A lot of people hate LangChain. There's this kind of love-hate with it, but I use it a lot for building these workflows. But there are these workflow tools that are coming up. A lot of people actually write some things from scratch for calling the APIs, or what's becoming more and more capable now is actually using local models where you're actually running the full AI model on a machine locally. That just a year ago, that wasn't really possible. Now there are some models and some capabilities that you can run locally. In another year, I think that will be a lot more common, that you actually run the whole thing locally. But we're probably about a year away from that. But these are the kind of tools that, like I say to people, either you or your partners have to be using these kind of tools.
You made a point there about where the value lies, and I know a lot of those in the research industry will say, oh, well, it's in the strategy, the design, and the collection. So once you've got that, but then there's also the analysis, and then the reporting, and the acting on as well. So it's quite broader, and some different views on that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, and I'm a big believer in human insight. I work for a company called Humanate, a human insight company, and I'm a big believer in that. And I think we will always need that, or we will always be able to get ahead by providing that. However, where that's provided will actually shift. There are things that we are doing now that we probably won't be doing, and we'll be handing over to the tools, in a year or two's time. Just like there are things we were doing 5 years ago that we don't really do now anymore. And so, so while I agree with that about the importance of the human strategy, the importance of that storytelling capability, that ability to bring things out, the nature of that will shift. One of the sayings we have inside Humanate is AI won't put you out of a job, but somebody using AI might. Okay, so that's kind of how we think about it, is that this is a set of tools, a set of capabilities that, if it's well used, if it's wielded appropriately, will give an advantage. So.
That's right. So Ben Page, the CEO of Ipsos, spoke at SMR Congress in 2023, and he was saying, look, I mean, like in all forms of life, you should plan for, say, 5 different scenarios of how, like your industry, your organization might be impacted by something like AI, and see how you can plan for those scenarios for when they happen. And it just gives you a little bit of a head start on being able to adapt for that. And look, you might find a new line of work or something, or cost savings or whatever it is, often opportunities to grow, etc. by doing so.
Yeah, that's very wise words. I'm a big believer in what some people call multi-future thinking, which I think is what he's saying, where you say you don't try and predict the future, but you say, here's 5 ways it could go, and am I robust against those 5? So,
that's right. So I guess this is a pivotal moment for those of us in the insights industry. You stress the need to embrace new technologies for competitiveness. Can you share some examples of companies successfully transitioning from that chat-centric approach to implementing AI to robust systems with workflows, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the companies that I've seen who are really making the most of this at the moment are the platform companies, are the companies which already have a workflow in place within their tools and are now actually building the AI workflows around that. I'm trying to remember some of the names. I was at TMRE the other week, and there was a nice little AI showcase where a bunch of companies were showing things, and most of the things that were most impressive were existing platform companies who were then basically supercharging their workflows using AI, especially in the area of semantic search of large amounts of data. So companies which were looking for trends in overall data, in wide scale global data and things like that. Those are the companies where I think we're seeing some really interesting work coming from, where they're basically supercharging the existing workflow within the platforms.
Nice. No, I was just thinking back to I worked at an organization that I went to a trade show conference in Australia, and this was back in 2017, I think it was. And there was someone there that had a business called Chatter AI, and the premise was chatting with your data. So quite ahead of the curve with that. Really fascinating to have that water under the bridge, that experience. And then it's 6-7 years later, like the world we're living in is just that. So
yeah, well, what you bring up an interesting point, because I think for a lot of people, they weren't really aware of the value of these new technologies until ChatGPT was released a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. And I think that's when a lot of people woke up to it. However, to your point, these people have been working in this area for a long time. A company I used to run had an AI-powered questionnaire running, basically a chat interviewer, back in 2012. Now it wasn't nearly as good as it could be done today with the new ones, but people have been working in these areas for a long time. And like I say, the real change in the technology happened around 2019, and people have been working using those. So I think, and again, this is why I try and encourage people to, I say to people, ChatGPT is brilliant. But think of it like the demo version. Okay, there's a lot more out there, and if you go out and look, you'll find these companies like the one that you were talking about, which have been doing this for 6 years. And yes, now they can be a little bit more sophisticated with it, but the concepts are there. These are not all new concepts. It's just that our capability to do it has become a lot easier than it used to be. That's
right. Yeah, and I guess as well, those that have been doing it for some time have already had to overcome the challenges of security. For instance, he was talking about a financial institution that really wanted to use this, but they had to have a black box, an anonymizer, which basically they went into. There's a bunch of security around that, and that could pull in from the send the query, etc. off to that. So there's a lot of things that sits behind this to make it a secure place for people to use in their organization.
Yeah, and that stuff takes a lot of building.
Yeah. No, true. So there will be a market research conference put on by our local research association here in New Zealand in March. The theme of that is, where are all the humans? So delving into the role of market researchers in light of the innovation we're seeing. So I guess to close off the conversation, what's your perspective on this topic? Where do humans sit in market research in the future?
Yeah, It's a good question, and I'm not seeing any less need for humans in market research, but I think the kind of things we're doing is going to shift. I think we need to be a lot more strategic. I think we need to be a lot more consultative, or that's going to become more of our job. We're going to become more storytellers as well. I think that these tools will actually take away and get us, take away a lot of the work that's taken a lot of our sweat and our sweat and toil to get to. A lot of that's going to go away, but there's still going to be the need to get a competitive advantage from our clients. Our clients aren't going to want just what all their competitors are getting. They're going to want something a little bit more. And I do believe that there will continue to be the need for the strategic, for the empathetic human in the mix. I just think that's going to become a bigger part of our job, not a smaller part of our job, because a lot of the other stuff is going to become a lot easier to do and a lot quicker to do. I think there's going to be some shifts. I think that there will be certain roles that go away, and there will be certain roles that become more important. And like everything, staying flexible, staying on top, staying aware of what's going on is going to be very important. One thing we know for sure, and this hasn't been true for a couple of decades, is you can't learn something at college and then stop learning. The world doesn't work like that. It hasn't worked like that for 30, 40 years, probably. It used to be you'd learn everything you needed to at college, and then you got a job and you did it. That's no longer true. I have no idea what my job will be in 3-4 years' time. I expect it will be quite different.
Sure.
So I think that when we think about where's the human being, I think we're still there, but it's the old thing. It's the old thing that the small furry mammals are going to do well. Those who can adapt, those who can find new ways of doing things, those who can really build on top of these new tools. That's where people are going to win. But I think our clients are always going to want to have a competitive advantage, and I think they're always going to look to us to give it to them.
For sure. I think one of the big roles of the market researcher, and this has always been the case, is about confidence in insights and findings, validation, and also explainability as well. So yes, you might be able to serve up this report that has been AI generated or influenced, but how did it come to that finding? How did it arrive at that decision? So excuse me. So how did it arrive at that decision? And then being able to dig deeper into that as well to understand this is how it's got there. And then also, okay, I've found out that there, but what happens if we look at it like this now and like this here? So being able to pivot on it and iterate on those findings as well. So I guess it's that innate curiosity, which is part of us as researchers. We want to dig in, understand people better. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So any final words before we close, Chris?
So firstly, just thank you for the opportunity for having this, for having this chat. This is something, as you've probably worked out, I'm fairly passionate about. I do think it's an exciting time. And I think that a lot of the excitement is warranted. At the same time, I think we have to do the human thing and make sure that we're navigating our way through this in the best way we can, and in the most aware, the most mindful way we can. And so that's why I think that, discussions like this, and other discussions that are going on in the organizations, the conferences are really important right now, and it's really important, I think, that people participate in those, because we could go, as an industry, we could go the wrong direction. Okay, and I think that the opportunity now is for us to get it right, and it's going to be tricky, but I think we've got the skills as an industry to do it.
So do you think we can have too many of these types of discussions?
Well, I think that what will happen is it's a good question. We are getting a lot of them at the moment. I think that what's going to happen is that as we move beyond the initial excitement of hype, we'll realize what some of the real challenges are, and maybe the discussions are going to get more and more focused. And that's kind of why I'm going out with a little bit with this message of think beyond chat, because we need to move on to the next step, as an industry. And there will be others. We haven't mentioned the ethics and the bias issues and all those things that are going to be huge issues for the industry. I'm not an expert in any of those, but they're going to be massively important. So I think we need to keep the conversations going, but I think, to your point, they're going to become more focused. They're going to become more specific about the challenges as the challenges become clearer.
No, very true. Wise words indeed. And thankfully, a lot of those from the larger tech companies are having those discussions on ethics, etc. It's not something that's just for the market researchers to tackle, I guess, but we need to be aware of what's happening there too.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been a really enlightening chat, and hopefully our audience has picked up a few things and happy to kick on past chat as an AI tool.
Okay, thank you. Great talking.
Cheers. And thanks also to everyone else who's listened in today. If you have enjoyed what you've heard, please feel free to leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, or even share it with others as well that might also have found it interesting or could learn something around the topic too. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.